Syria, it seems that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the successor of Jabhat al-Nusra, an affiliate of al-Qaeda, ultimately is calling the shots in terms of the Islamism there. The US right now seems to be
Right.
kind of staying out of this, shunning Assad. But it could be a better ally for the Kurds who could face some serious obstacles in the future. The US has been complicated. On one hand, it seems to support the rebels right now,
Right.
despite the rebels being led by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani,
Hmm.
who has a $10 million, not per
Um,
se bounty, but
mhm.
reward at least for information.
Hello and welcome to this yet brand new episode on One India, where we discuss the scenarios emanating from the exit of Bashar al-Assad from Syria, and now what happens next? What is the next road ahead for Syria? And to discuss that further, we are joined by Jordan Cope, Middle East and Counter-Terrorism expert, originally from Texas in the United States, but as of now, joining us from Erfurt in Germany. Jordan, thank you so much for taking time out for One India.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Right, Jordan, straight away getting into the thick of the things here. When we talk about Syria, when we talk about Iraq, there's one name that comes to our mind, and that is ISIS. Now that the quote unquote regime is gone, the Assad regime is gone, the rebels have taken over, ISIS remnants are still there in Syria. And how does their presence continue to impact the region's stability or instability, if I may say so? And what strategies do you think that the international community must adopt to neutralize this threat effectively?
So while ISIS isn't leading the current opposition to the Syrian National Army,
Mhm.
Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is, which has some affiliations to ISIS and certainly to Al-Qaeda. But
Mhm.
that's not to dismiss the fact that
Mhm.
ISIS fighters have embedded within the Syrian rebels, which recently toppled the Assad regime. So
Mhm.
it's important to understand that while ISIS certainly has some remnants remaining, they're not so much the threat that they used to be. In recent years, ISIS has
Mhm.
actually kind of fostered a presence in some African hotspots, conducting operations between multinational border regions, exploiting natural resources there and kind of regaining some ground.
Mhm.
In Syria, it seems that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the successor of Jabhat al-Nusra, an affiliate of al-Qaeda, ultimately is calling the shots in terms of the Islamism there. It should be noted that the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham did previously have strong affiliations to ISIS and rose through the ranks there. So it
Mhm.
remains yet to be determined how ISIS will resurge in Syria and in Iraq. But certainly a movement that has been designated as a terrorist group in part of the world
Mhm. Absolutely.
has power.
Absolutely. And goes without any saying there. When it comes to the bigger picture, Jordan, and we throw United States into the whole scheme of things, how do you assess the effectiveness of the US current policies in Syria, particularly in support of the Kurdish groups that are there, and in the past, a very strategic ambiguity, I would say, towards Assad's regime? It was never very clear which side US is on.
Yeah, so it should be noted that the US unfortunately has to a degree betrayed the Kurds at the same time as it has supported them. The Kurds remain some of our greatest allies in northern Syria. The SDF since 2015 has effectively secured a good part of the northern parts of Syria and
Mhm.
has guaranteed some sort of security. That being said, one of the biggest backers in this conflict is also a NATO ally, and that is Turkey, which the US has complicated relations with. The US hopes that it doesn't sway towards Russia, but the US is also concerned about Turkey's intervention into the area, its ethnic displacement of Kurds, shamefully. And Turkey has ultimately seized this conflict and has backed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and has created a new sphere of regional influence for itself. It should be mentioned that Qatar has also backed
Mhm.
Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and Turkey throughout the Syrian civil war allowed ISIS fighters and financiers to seek safe haven near its border.
Mm.
If I recall properly, I think Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was actually killed quite near the Turkish border.
Right.
And so, in regards to US policy, it's been a bit confusing. Assad did offer some sort of stability,
Hmm.
albeit the civil war, very tragic, hundreds of thousands of lives lost. But the US has been complicated. On one hand, it seems to support the rebels right now,
Right.
despite the rebels being led by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani,
Hmm.
who has a $10 million not
Um,
per se bounty, but
mhm.
reward at least for information regarding either his arrest or termination. And so the US right now seems to be
Right.
kind of staying out of this, shunning Assad. But it could be a better ally for the Kurds who could face some serious obstacles in the future.
Right. Right. Absolutely. The local, dynamics there are changing thick and fast as we speak, and the ground reports are also very disturbing at times. When it comes to who owns what, that kind of scenario is going down there. Nonetheless, Bashar al-Assad has now moved on to Russia. Russia has also made it clear. Kremlin has given the statement. Russia has had a lot of political and business military interest in Syria. Investments have been there for quite some time now. How do you think that with Assad leaving for Russia, the long-term goals here that Russia might have had in Syria, do they create an imbalance in order to create stability in Syria? Or could it be a win-win situation for the Syrians?
I think it's too early to tell right now. It
Mhm.
seems that Russian ships have retreated. Iran previously had a port in Latakia. It was quite a major port in terms of Russian strategic interest, being its, if I recall, its only port on the Mediterranean.
Mhm.
That being said, it's too early to tell. Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham seem to be feigning a more tolerant attitude for now, encouraging foreign emissaries and consulates to stay and to give amnesty to Assad's former soldiers and to other fighters. But it's too early to tell. I mean, we've seen similar tactics in terms of feigning moderacy from the Taliban.
Mhm.
And certainly that did not pan out well. And I'm not optimistic about how Hayat Tahrir al-Sham will behave in the future. And
Mhm.
so it is too early to tell. It is important to note that Russia is not the only one to lose here. Iran is a big loser in this current conflict.
Right.
Syria has effectively divided the Shiite Islamist crescent, which Iran has hoped to use to eventually attack Israel from. That crescent connected Iran to Iraq, to Syria, to Lebanon, and now Hezbollah, which was dealt serious losses in the
Mhm.
war it initiated effectively against Israel. Nowadays, Hezbollah is going to be cut off from that Iranian axis and that supply line. And so, yeah, Iran has lost a big Shiite Islamist ally in Bashar al-Assad and Alawi. I am concerned for the future of the Alawi people as an ethnic group in Syria. It's all a bit too early to tell, but there are certainly some clear losers, being Iran, being Russia,
Mhm.
some winners being Turkey and Qatar, and definitely some uncertainties for countries such as Israel and for ethnic groups like the Kurds and other Syrian minorities.
Right. Mentioning about minorities, I remember 2015 was the time when Syrian refugees were dotting the streets of Istanbul, and it was quite a scenario there. How even the local, Turkish people wanted them out. How does it impact Turkey, being the closest of the neighbors there, has seen the brunt earlier also of minority movement there? Do you believe that for Recep Tayyip Erdogan, there are tough days ahead, at least diplomatically?
It'll certainly be interesting. I think there's a good chance that Hayat Tahrir al-Sham might have been ignited a bit by Turkey behind the scenes
Hmm.
because of breakdowns in talks between Assad and Erdogan in terms of rapprochement, in terms of determining what would happen to the 3 to 4 million Syrian migrants in Turkey that have become a headache for the
Hmm.
AKP, who have certainly had lost in recent elections, and more local elections more than they would have liked to. And so the 3 to 4 million migrants, Syrian migrants, it was Turkey's hope to eventually restore them to northern Syria, which is why it invaded and has since occupied parts of northern Syria. And so Turkey is definitely not the most pleasant place to be a minority in, especially being a Kurd. And so it definitely is a concerning time to see what will happen with all those migrants.
Mhm.
Hopefully, they will be able to return safely to northern Syria or to Syria alone in the future.
Mhm.
But be a win for Turkey, which now has an excuse to kind of send those migrants home, and maybe even as well for some European nations who are tired of issues pertaining to migrants throughout the EU. So it's a situation yet to be seen what will happen. But it definitely seems that the refugee status of some of these migrants might no longer apply.
Indeed. We'll have to wait and watch, Jordan. We hope that peace and tranquility prevails in that particular region. And the way things are shaping up geopolitically, diplomatically, well, every passing day, every passing hour needs to be treaded very carefully. Thank you so much, Jordan Cope, there, Middle East and counterterrorism expert, joining us all the way from Germany. Thank you, Jordan. We would like to host you more on One India. Thank you so much for taking time out.
A pleasure. Thank you as always for having me.
Don't miss out. Log on to oneindia.com for more updates.